She told me she loved me, but she wasn't happy. At first I thought it was just a rough patch, something we could work through, but the more she said it, the more it started to sound final. Like love wasn't enough anymore. I kept trying to fix things, trying to hold on, but every conversation felt like running in circles. No matter what I said, we ended up right back where we started. Stuck, distant, slowly unraveling. And then one morning everything changed. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She just looked at me like I was already gone. That's when I knew I had to make a choice, not between staying or leaving, but between losing her or losing myself. What came next? I didn't expect the silence, the messages, the truth that came too late, but by then I had already let go. This is the story of how I walked away from someone I still loved, because I finally realized I wasn't loved back the same way. It always started the same way. We'd be sitting on the couch, maybe after dinner, or in the middle of one of those long, aimless conversations about life. And then, out of nowhere, she'd say it again. I love you, but I'm not happy. Same words, same tone, like a quiet grenade landing in the middle of our silence. Every time I heard it, I'd feel something inside me shift, like a crack forming in the foundation of something I thought was solid at first. I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, what does that even mean? You love me, but you're not happy. I'd ask her, is it me? Is there something I'm not doing right? And she'd shake her head saying, no, it's not you, it's just, I don't know, I feel off, like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And I'd just sit there, nodding, trying to be understanding. But inside, I was panicking. Because here's the thing, I was all in. I wasn't halfway or unsure or confused. I had already imagined a future with her, the place we'd live, the kids we might have, the way our mornings would look when we got old. She wasn't just a part of my life, she was the blueprint. But each time she said those words, it felt like she was chipping away at that future, like she was handing me pieces of something broken and asking me to pretend it was still whole. I started paying attention more closely, trying to read between the lines of everything she said. Was she pulling away? Was she thinking of leaving? Some nights I'd lie in bed next to her while she scrolled on her phone, and I'd wonder if she was texting someone else, or if maybe she was just somewhere else entirely, emotionally. I hated that I even had those thoughts, but they were there, quiet, persistent, growing louder the more she said that phrase. We stopped talking about plans. Before, we'd spend hours talking about our future, where we'd travel, the kind of wedding we wanted, what we'd name our dog. But now when I brought up anything beyond the present, her face would change, her smile would fade just slightly, and then she'd look away and say something like, let's just take things slow for now. Slow started to sound a lot like stop. I remember one night, I made us dinner, her favorite grilled salmon with lemon butter, roasted vegetables, and that red wine she liked. I lit candles, played her playlist in the background. I was trying to remind her of everything we had. And halfway through the meal, she looked up and said, you're really sweet, you know that. And I smiled. I thought maybe, just maybe, things were shifting, that we were coming back to us. But then, right after she took a sip of wine, she said it again. I love you, but I'm not happy. I didn't even know what to say. I just stared at her. My throat was tight, my chest felt heavy. I wanted to ask, then why are you here? But I didn't. I was afraid of the answer. That night, I stayed up after she went to bed. I just sat there on the couch staring at nothing. I started asking myself questions I didn't want to ask. Like, was she trying to leave me without actually leaving me? Was she waiting for me to be the one to break things off so she wouldn't have to? Or worse, was she already gone, emotionally, and I was the only one who hadn't caught up? It started affecting everything, my focus at work, my mood with friends. I became quieter, more reserved. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, looking for clues, trying to pinpoint the moment she started to drift. The hardest part was, she never stopped saying she loved me, so I kept holding on, because love's supposed to be enough, right? But I was beginning to learn that sometimes it's not. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't mean. She didn't yell or blame or accuse. That made it harder, honestly, because how do you get angry at someone who's not doing anything wrong, but still making you feel like you're not enough? That quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't explode, but lingers like a slow burn, that's the kind that stays with you the longest. And the worst part, I was starting to repeat those words to myself. I love you, but I'm not happy, over and over. Like I was being trained to accept that this was normal, that this was just what relationships look like when they start to die. But deep down, I knew something was coming, a moment when I wouldn't be able to ignore it anymore, when I'd have to face the truth I'd been trying to outrun. I just didn't know it would come so soon. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like a pause before the end of something. That's what our conversations had turned into. They weren't fights, and they weren't deep talks anymore. They were just the stalls. Like we were circling around a decision neither of us wanted to say out loud. We'd start off normal enough. I'd bring something up like, hey, should we start looking at apartments for next year? And she'd hesitate, not long enough to be obvious, but just long enough that I felt it. Then she'd say something like, I don't know if now's the right time. Let's just see how things go. That was her go-to line. Let's just see how things go. But we'd been seeing how things go for months now. I wanted to build something with her. I wanted movement, a direction. And she wanted ... comfort. Or maybe just the illusion of stability. Without having to commit to anything real. I started noticing the little shifts, like when I'd talk about my goals, starting a new business, traveling together, saving up for a future, and she'd just nod. Not excited, not critical, ... just blank. Like she was watching a movie she'd already seen and didn't really care how it ended. One night, we were at dinner with friends. Everyone was talking about upcoming plans. Someone just bought a condo, another couple had set a wedding date, and someone turned to us and asked, "So, what's next for you two?" I looked at her, smiling, thinking she'd say something, anything, but she just laughed and said, "We're figuring it out." I remember how those words stung, because in private we weren't figuring anything out, we were stuck, and I felt stupid in that moment because I realized I'd been waiting for her to move forward with me, when all along she'd been quietly pulling away. I asked her about it later. "Why did you say that?" She shrugged and said, "Because I don't know what's next, isn't that okay?" And I wanted to say yes, but every part of me was screaming no. Because if you love someone, really love them, you want to know what's next. You want to dream about it, plan for it, heaven if it scares you, but her heart wasn't in it. I think it had already started drifting long before I realized it. Maybe she thought she was sparing me by not being honest. Maybe she didn't want to be the bad guy, but that's the thing, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is speak the hard truth. Our talks became shorter. I'd bring up something important, and she'd redirect. I'd ask how she felt, and she'd say, "I don't know, can we talk later?" But later never came, and I started to feel like I was the only one fighting to keep something alive, like I was clapping with one hand, waiting for the echo that never came. I remember sitting across from her one evening, watching her scroll through her phone, and thinking, I miss you even when you're right in front of me. That's a terrible kind of loneliness, when someone's body is present but their heart is somewhere else. And still, I kept trying. I thought maybe if I said the right thing, reminded her of the memories, the laughter, the promises we'd made, she'd remember why we started, why we mattered. But every time I reached out, it felt like I was reaching into a fog. No shape, no answer, just more uncertainty. She'd say things like, "I just need time," or "I don't want to make any big decisions right now." And I told myself that meant she needed me to be patient, that she was struggling and I had to hold on a little longer. But deep down, I knew I wasn't waiting for clarity. I was just delaying the inevitable. The final straw came during one of our last talks. I said, "I need to know where this is going. I can't keep living in limbo." And she looked at me softly, almost apologetically, and said, "I don't think I can give you that answer." That was it. No argument, number fight, just that quiet truth. And in that moment, everything became clear. We weren't building a life together. We were holding on to the shadow of one. So many conversations, all of them leading nowhere. Because no matter how much I wanted us to work, she'd already stopped imagining a future where we were together. And I finally had to ask myself, was I staying because I believed in us, or because I was afraid to let go of what used to be? That was the moment I realized, love isn't always enough if one person is standing still and the other's already walking away. It happened on a Sunday morning. Funny how the biggest moments of clarity don't arrive in chaos, they show up in silence. No storm, no shouting, just stillness. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a half-full cup of coffee, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. And then, it hit me. She hadn't said "I love you" in over a week. I hadn't noticed at first because I'd been saying it for both of us, covering the silence, filling in the blanks, hoping that if I said it enough, she'd say it back, like she used to, with warmth, with conviction, with something real. But that morning it all unraveled. She came downstairs, hair tied up, barely looked at me. She reached for a glass, poured some orange juice, and said, "I think I'm gonna go see my mom later." No good morning, no kiss on the cheek, just logistics. I nodded, pretending that didn't sting. Then she sat across from me and scrolled through her phone while I just watched her. I watched the way her eyes lit up, reading some message, the faint smile she tried to hide. It wasn't for me, and I knew that. I knew it deep in my gut. I asked, quietly, "Are you happy?" She looked up, surprised by the question. "What, are you happy with us, with me?" She blinked, put the phone down. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I think you're not. And I need to stop pretending I don't see it." She didn't respond right away, just stared at her juice like it had answers. Then she said, almost like a whisper, "I don't know what I feel anymore." And those 7 words shattered me, because it wasn't just uncertainty. It was a confession. She was telling me, in the gentlest way possible, that I was no longer where her heart lived. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why she stayed, why she let me hold on to something that had already slipped through her fingers, but I didn't. I just sat there frozen. Every memory we had, every moment I thought meant something suddenly. It all felt like it belonged to another lifetime. And then, I asked something I never thought I would. "Is there someone else?" She hesitated, That hesitation was enough. No, she said, too quickly, of course not. But her eyes said maybe. Her body language said maybe. And the fact that she had to deny it at all said everything. I didn't ask again. I didn't want to hear a lie just to soothe my pride. Instead, I said, I think I'm done. I didn't plan to say it. I hadn't rehearsed it. It just slipped out quiet but final. And the second those words left my mouth, something inside me cracked. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally realized I couldn't carry this alone anymore. She looked at me like I'd just flipped the world upside down. What do you mean? I mean, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending we're okay when we're not. I can't keep shrinking myself, hoping you'll meet me halfway. I've been holding this relationship up with both hands, and I'm tired. And for the first time in months, she cried. Not because she wanted to fight for us, but because she knew I meant it. I was really letting go. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Not out of anger, because I'd spent so long begging for crumbs of affection, and I couldn't do it anymore. The rest of the day was a blur. We didn't argue. We didn't unpack anything. We just coexisted in silence, like two people mourning something they'd already lost long ago. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because the bed didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a lie. I laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The dinners, the late-night drives, the laughter, the way she used to hold my hand in crowded rooms. I thought about the way she'd once looked at me like I was her entire future, and how now I was barely her present, and I cried. Quietly, the kind of tears you don't even try to stop. Because when a love dies this slowly, the grief doesn't come in one big wave, it shows up in pieces. In silent mornings, in half-finished conversations, in coffee cups left untouched. That Sunday morning, I broke, not because I was weak, but because I finally accepted the truth I'd been avoiding for so long. She wasn't mine anymore, and maybe she never really was. You always imagine the end of a relationship like some dramatic explosion, yelling, crying, slamming doors, but for me it was quiet, almost too quiet that morning. I woke up before her. The sunlight was creeping through the curtains, and for a second I thought about staying, about rolling over and wrapping my arms around her one last time, but I didn't, because I knew we weren't that anymore. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, and I said to myself, this is it. Today's the day. There were no packed bags, no exit speech. I just moved through the house like a ghost, brushing my teeth, pouring a coffee, folding the blanket from the couch where I'd slept the night before. Everything felt numb, like I'd already left emotionally days ago. This was just the physical part catching up. She came downstairs around 9, rubbing her eyes, still in her pajamas. She looked at me like she wasn't sure what version of me she was going to get. Angry, hurt, cold, but I was none of those things. I said, I'm heading out for a bit. She nodded. Okay, want me to grab something for dinner later? And I said, no, you don't have to. That was the first moment she paused. Her eyes lingered on mine, like she felt something shift, but she didn't ask. I picked up my keys, my wallet, my phone, and then I looked around the living room, our living room, the couch we picked out together, the photos on the wall, the books she never read but liked the aesthetic of. It wasn't home anymore. It was just a place with our past pinned to the walls. I opened the door, stepped outside, and just like that, Ty walked away. No closure. No final kiss. No movie scene goodbye. Because sometimes love doesn't die with a bang. It just slowly withers until there's nothing left to hold on to. As I drove down the street, I didn't cry. I didn't blast music or scream into the air. I just drove, window down, one hand on the wheel, breathing like I hadn't in months. And you know what hit me the hardest? The relief. It wasn't supposed to feel like that, right? You're supposed to feel broken, wrecked, unsure. But I felt light, like I'd finally stopped trying to hold together something that was already crumbling halfway down the highway. My phone buzzed. Her name. I ignored it. Then another text, then another. I didn't mean for it to end like this. We should talk, please don't leave like this. But the thing is, I'd already stayed far longer than I should have. I'd held on through cold silences and forced smiles and nights spent pretending to be okay, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was choosing myself. I pulled over at a gas station and sat in the car, just staring at my phone. Her messages blinking on the screen like little sparks of desperation. But I knew deep down I wasn't the one she wanted. She just didn't want to be alone. And that's not the same thing. We had love once, real love, but love needs more than history. It needs presence. It needs effort. And when you're the only one fighting, eventually you lose even yourself in the battle. I thought about replying, about saying something kind, something final. But I didn't want to soften the truth with pretty words. I didn't want to give her hope I couldn't sustain. So I just turned the phone off, and for the next few hours I just drove. No map, no destination, just motion. Because sometimes, moving forward isn't about knowing where you're going. It's just about not staying where you were. Later that evening I pulled into a motel. Small, dusty, nothing fancy. I checked in with a fake name, paid in cash. I didn't want to be found. I stood in that tiny room and looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in what felt like years, I saw someone I recognized. Someone not defined by someone else's happiness. Someone trying to heal. That night I slept like a rock. No twisted dreams, no tossing and turning, just sleep. The next morning, I opened the window and let the cold air in. I made myself coffee from the little packet they give you near the sink. It tasted awful, but it was mine, my choice, my moment. I didn't regret leaving. I didn't doubt it for a second, because the truth is sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting to stay, it's choosing to walk away. Quietly, kindly, with dignity. It was a few days after I left when the texts really started coming in. Not just one or two, a whole stream of them. Long ones, short ones, some saying she missed me, others saying she was confused. And then the ones that started with, I didn't mean it like that, but the thing is, she did. She meant it exactly the way it sounded. Maybe not in the moment, maybe not with malice, but it was her truth. When someone says, I love you, but I'm not happy, over and over again, it means something. And I finally stopped twisting those words into hope. I started hearing them for what they really were, a quiet way of letting me down without ever fully letting me go. One text said, I didn't realize how much I depended on you until you left. And I just stared at it, thinking, that's the problem, isn't it? I wasn't loved, I was leaned on. And there's a big difference between someone needing you and someone choosing you. She said she missed our talks. The way I listened, the way I made her feel safe. But not once did she say she regretted pushing me away. Not once did she say, I still see a future with you. It was all nostalgia, missing the warmth, not the relationship. It hurt, I won't lie. There was a moment, I remember it clearly, was standing in line at a coffee shop, reading one of her messages. It was long, emotional. She said, I didn't know how unhappy I was until you left, and now I don't know who I am without you. And I just felt tired, not angry, not broken, just tired. Because I had already gone through every stage, hurt, confusion, grief, and now I was on the other side. The part no one really talks about. The part where you stop needing answers, where the questions don't matter anymore because you already know the truth, and it doesn't change anything. That's when I realized closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you give yourself. I didn't reply to that message, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I knew any reply would drag me back into a story that had already ended, and I couldn't reopen that chapter, not for guilt, not for comfort, not even for the love we used to share. People always say if they reach out, maybe it means they care. And maybe that's true. Maybe she did care, but caring after the damage is done isn't the same as showing up when it matters. Love that comes after the silence, after the withdrawal, after someone finally walks away, it's too late. And I finally understood that a few days later. She sent a voice note. I didn't play it. I deleted it. I think that was the final moment for me. Not dramatic, not emotional, just clean. I didn't need to hear her voice tremble. I didn't need to hear her say she was sorry, because I'd made peace with the fact that sometimes love doesn't end with hate. It ends with emptiness. I went back to my place that evening and sat on the balcony, watched the sun dip behind the skyline, and I thought about the version of me that used to sit there waiting for her to come home, how he would check the time, check his phone, count the hours between her texts. That version of me was gone. I didn't hate her. I still don't. I think that's what makes it harder for people to understand. You can still care about someone, and no, they're not meant for you. You can still have love in your heart and choose peace instead. In the end, her texts didn't reopen any wounds. They just reminded me how far I'd come. That I'd learned to listen to what wasn't being said. That I stopped confusing mixed signals with affection. That I finally stopped chasing clarity from someone who wasn't even clear with herself. Don't know where she is now. I don't know who she's with, and I don't need to because I'm not stuck in the story anymore. I let go, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with the quiet, steady kind of strength that only comes after you've finally chosen yourself, and that was the love I needed all along.